Hey, leaders. In this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Kurtis and I are joined by longtime friend and colleague Nancy MacLellan. Nancy has over 30 years' experience in the classroom and other roles, and now she's having a blast in her consulting role following retirement as a classroom teacher.
This episode is also part of the National Literacy Month with Reading is Fundamental campaign, a partnership between the Bead Podcast Network and Reading is Fundamental to host numerous productive conversations across our network of podcasts about developing kids' reading and literacy skills for life. So let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts.
Welcome to episode 39 of Leading Collaborative Response. I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson, also lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. Today, we're super excited to engage in a conversation with our friend Nancy MacLellan, a recently retired teacher after over 30 years in schools and now owner of Nancy Mac Consulting, where she works with schools establishing robust and data-informed literacy intervention to impact all students. We're super excited to dive into what Nancy has learned about establishing school-wide interventions and how a system of literacy supports can have impact for all students as part of a school's collaborative response. So welcome to the podcast, Nancy. Great to see you.
Good to see you guys too. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I started off with the retired part and after 30 years, but that leaves a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
Why don't you fill in some of those gaps? Give us and our audience a bit of your background as an educator that's led you to this point.
Sure. So I have been teaching for a very long time. After I graduated, I did some substitute teaching and kind of got my feet wet. I was trained in early elementary, and so then that's where I started. I worked in some remote areas first, Northern Canada, and then on some Indigenous reserves in Northern Alberta. And then I ended up in a K-3 school where I spent most of my teaching time and started out as a grade 2 teacher. Loved teaching grade 2. And then we took some training on reading intervention. And it was decided that I would free up some of time in my day so that I could do that reading intervention. So I was doing the reading intervention in small groups. I was also supporting our special education, learning about linguistics and speech development, helped our speech delayed students. And then it turned out after the first year, I did about 25% outside of the classroom. The next year, I did 50%. And the year after that, I was full-time out of the classroom helping our struggling students.
Mm-hmm.
And my principal and I ended up sitting down and saying, why do we have so many struggling students? Why is it taking this much of your time to help this number of struggling students? We only had 120 students in our school. So why are so many struggling? And that really started our journey into what makes a student fall behind in the process of learning to read. And then how do we best support them as they are making that leap through and closing the gap in that learning development? And then that put us on our path to where we ended up doing BLAST in our school, which we did school-wide.
Awesome. And I know that that's kind of led you to where you're at now. So why don't just share really quickly the work is that you do that started from that initial engagement, but now is kind of the life after the classroom for you, Nancy.
Yeah. So I wanted life after the classroom, not necessarily in the classroom, but still doing that really important work. And it's just so fulfilling to get students where they need to be and have them realize that they are capable of learning all of the skills that they need to be proficient readers. So what I did was during my time in developing this intervention at our school, I created a set of resources that were really crucial to getting the work started. And what I did was when I retired, I created those as my own. So I have all original materials. And so what it is a resource for a large group of teachers to use to help students reach their maximum, their reading potential. So I have the resources, and what I'm doing now is working with schools and helping them with the logistics of providing reading intervention in a really collaborative way, which is why it ties in so nicely with you, Kurtis. And of course, the idea originally was yours, as my principal and I struggled with this idea and met with you after one of our CRM meetings. And you shared how you had done a school-wide intervention at your school when you were principal. And we were really intrigued by that. And we decided that in my role, I could develop materials and a game plan. And so now what I'm doing is working with schools who don't have somebody in my position that's able to really dedicate to the big picture idea of how to make it all work. So I've been working with teachers in classrooms. I've been training teachers and EAs in how to teach the lessons that come with the materials that I've developed, timetabling and scheduling and all of those hurdles. It is a massive project to start with, but once you get to go with things, it's really so beneficial to students because you're able to meet students' individual needs. As a classroom teacher, I would look at my class of 20 odd students and say, these two need this skill, these three need this skill, this one needs this skill. And my cohorts in the other grade 2 classes were doing the same thing. They had 2 students who needed this and 2 students who needed this. And to try to meet all of those needs is daunting when you also have all the other students. And then time you spend in that intervention within the classroom, you're really kind of taking away from the other students. So by doing an embedded intervention block, 30 minutes a day is what we did every day. And every student in the school did something to benefit them. And they all moved around. So we could put those two students, we could put them all together in one little group. So we knew students were getting what they needed, exactly what they needed, when they needed it. And it could benefit our struggling students, our on grade students, and we could even challenge our exceptional students all at the same time.
That's so beautiful, Nancy. Hey, we have mentioned a couple of times we've used the word BLAST. It's an acronym. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So we call it BLAST. We wanted a hook to get the kids excited, right? And we wanted it to be quite very flexible within grades, within genders. We didn't want it to be, something that was stuck. So we chose BLAST. Kurtis also called his BLAST as well. We tweaked the acronym a little bit. So we call it building literacy and supporting teamwork, because we want to build our literacy skills. That's our goal. We want to have proficient readers, but we're also really supporting that teamwork. We're getting our EAs are teaching, our gym teacher teaches, our librarian teaches, everybody who's available teaches. And so by building our literacy and supporting our teamwork, we found a real feeling of collaboration really expand within our school, which of course started with collaborative response. We were well into collaborative response. And so it really took hold and really fit really well with that idea of doing BLAST as a school-wide intervention.
Well, and it sounds very much like, and I know this from our conversations, that what you were experiencing as a school was the same thing we were when it came to really trying to ensure literacy success for our students, that to provide the intervention, it meant a pullout, which meant students were missing something else, which meant one person would get stretched super thin to try and meet all of those needs. And it got to that place of, no, we should be providing intervention or support for every student. How could we do that effectively? And again, really living with that core mantra of collaborative response, that these are our students.
And I love the idea, and Nancy, you already spoke to this. I love the idea of creating that structure where we are attending to students who are struggling with particular areas of concern. But we are also supporting students who are at grade level, and even more, extending students who need to be enriched.
It's amazing. Once we have that intervention block, that's the first key, have the time set. And once we have that intervention block where nobody in the school had any learning outside of their own classroom.
Right.
No gym periods, no music, no library.
Yeah, no specials.
No specials. And so once we had that block, we could do anything with that block. It was amazing. We could, if our principal had a special task they needed to do, we would pull a group of 12 students out and they would be part of that special group and they could do special things. We had, so the foundational part of learning to read is really the phonological awareness and phonics. We need to be able to hear the sounds in the words, and then we need to be able to understand the written symbols that go with those sounds. That's the beginning. And those are the two of the pillars of reading. And of course, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension being the others. We really honed in and really broke down the phonological awareness and phonics into very small skills and really focused on those skills one at a time, developmentally progressing so that students didn't miss things. We found COVID was just so detrimental to missing so many little pieces. The teaching carried on, we taught, but there's so many incremental little things that you do in the classroom that didn't translate to our learning. And so, especially in those learning to read grades, grade 1 and grade 2, it was really devastating. And so we broke it down to small increments so that each little piece could be taught to the students and they would progress through from one skill to the next. So really precise assessment was key. And then really good record keeping and assessment of learning as you're going, right? So you're going, you finish working on one skill, you do an assessment at the end of that skill. Do you go on? Did they get it or did they do it again? Each skill. And so then you're really can be confident in building a really skilled reader and not missing any pieces that go with it. So those phonological awareness and phonics covered in BLAST. But then the goal really is that those other skills, students who are working at grade level or above grade level, they can work on those other skills. We had groups of doing readers theater, which is wonderful for fluency. So we had skilled readers doing readers theater. I had a teacher who wanted to do writing. And so she took some of the top readers that we had and did a beautiful writing clinic with them. So they were really extending their learning. You can make it fit so that there's something for everyone that really hits where they need to be. We had the other really important thing that I really allowed for was very specialized training. So a lot of teachers go out and do PD and do training to become skilled in something. For example, I was trained in a program called Visualizing and Verbalizing, which is for students that have trouble picturing as they read. But once I was trained in it, I can't really get out of my classroom to go and do it. And it's very specialized. Only certain students need it throughout the school. So what we were able to do in BLAST is another teacher trained in that we trained together. I was able to give her a diverse group of 7 students from grades 1 to 3, all mixed, and she could actually do that intervention. Even though she was a grade 1 teacher, she could work with everybody to do it. So there's a lot of flexibility within your teaching staff, your support staff. Our librarian had gotten social emotional books, and she really wanted to read those social emotional books. Wonderful. Get a nice cross group of grade 1s to 3s, kindergartens to grade 3. Get a beautiful cross group of students, read a book, and then you get a really great discussion that you wouldn't get with just a group of kindergartens. And you also wouldn't get it with just a group of grade 3. So she did that, which was right in her wheelhouse. But it was very flexible so that it could account to everybody's needs and everybody's strengths.
Yeah. Okay, so Nancy, we're going to break down the secret sauce for leaders that are listening to this, and we're saying create the time, and then you can grow into it. That's one of the keys to be able to hear. I think another one that we need to be really cognizant of, because I see schools that make this mistake, and we did it as well, is they create this block of time and then they put students into groups based on levels, reading levels. And what we found is that was not an effective way to provide intervention. It might work in some of our classroom instruction for sure, but when we're trying to do interventions, we need skill-based.
Yeah, and
focus on the
children
skills.
Are at different levels for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or they could be at the same level, but for different reasons.
You get everyone in the H group, let's say, but each one had a different skill gap that was placing them at that level. So I think the skill, the other thing that came through that I think we need to make really crystal clear for the leaders or those listening to this is almost the creation of skill areas or kits, for instance, to be able to say that for this skill, here's the intervention kit that goes with it. We'll create them over time. But we found once we did that, we could train somebody on teaching that kit or that particular skill that then could get repeated over and over. So it didn't mean that every person, our educational assistants or paraprofessionals included, not every person had to be a reading specialist, but you could be focused in on learning to teach this one skill really well, and then we could repeat that over and over.
Yeah, it really is fundamental to the teaching of phonics, is that idea that you are explicitly teaching the skill. Yeah. So there's no guessing on what are we learning today. We start every lesson with, today we're learning about when two letters come together and make one sound. That's what we're learning today. And today we're learning about the letters C and H. That's what we're learning. We're not trying to get them to figure it out. We're being very explicit, and we're teaching CH. That's what we're teaching. Yeah. Tomorrow we're going to teach SH. When we practice, we're going to have SH and CH. The next day we're going to teach TH. But when we practice, we're going to have SH and TH and SH and CH. We're going to be cumulative as we go. We're going to be very cumulative. And we're also, when I developed the toolkits, what I was very specific about was having enough differentiation so that the students would still be engaged in the learning. So every day they do a word sort. So it's interactive. They hold the cards. They're always touching something. So it's tactile, multisensory. They're laying the cards. They're moving the cards. They're rearranging the cards. So they're always involved. But they do that every day. They do that sorting every day. So they become very proficient at seeing the patterns in the words right away. They get really good at really noticing and paying attention to the words. Yeah. We practice with a game, and we learn a new skill, and then we practice our new skill with a game. Those games repeat over and over and over. So we don't have to learn a new game. I don't know if you've ever tried to play a phonics game that takes you 10 minutes to explain the rules, and then you draw a card, you roll the dice, you move, you argue about whose turn it is, you pull the card, you read one. So you're taking a minute and a half to read one word. And that's not what we want. We want lots of hits on that reading. So really designing to have lots of hits. So bearing that in mind as you develop your resources, try to have it being consistent with just enough variety to keep the kids engaged and really, really interactive. We really, really want students talking. We really need them talking, and we need all of the students paying attention and talking. I talk a lot when I work with teachers. I talk a lot about the defeat that a lot of our students feel. We've got grade 3 students sitting in a classroom that can't read what's going on. They can't read the science book. They can't read the social studies book. They can't. And they get really defeated. And a lot of times working with these students, they don't want to participate because there's no way they know the answer. Like there's no way. They're dumb, is what I say. And so the first thing we need to do as we teach is be really conscious of that and really pull the students in, giving them lots of chances to be right. I heard one time early in my teaching that it takes a lot of attagirls to overcome her being wrong when she answers a question.
Right.
So this beating down that they've taken in not knowing, a lot of them won't venture to answer a question. And so I really want to prime that pump and get them confident that they can learn. And then once we do that, then we start to see some really good progress. So having your teaching materials set up that way, focused on one specific skill, being progressive within the kit so that you're always going back and reviewing as you're teaching. That's what I would say is the next important thing after setting your time period. It's also going to, by having those materials, that's one of the reasons why I produce the materials and I go and I support schools with the materials, is because that's daunting to get you started. And if I've got a staff of 15 and now we're going to be developing kits, that gets to be really time consuming, and everybody has a different slant in how to do it. This way it's ready to go. So I've worked with substitute teachers. I've worked with EAs. We had our music teacher teaching it, and gym teachers. They open it and teach. We had subs that would come in our school and they'd say, "What day is it for blast?" I'd say, "Day 6. They go, "Okay." And they'd open up day 6 during recess, take a little look at it and go, "Okay, I'm ready." And all the days are basically the same. You don't have to teach the kids how to play the game. They know how to play the game.
So,
right?
Nancy, I know Lorna's going to have a data question here for you. But I think this is another key for people to understand that we didn't right away is creating cycles like you talked about on day 6, but cycles so that it's not, we're recreating the age-old bluebirds and hummingbirds and magpie groupings, right? That you're in this intervention group for life, but to go in cycles. So can you explain what you found around that whole cycling idea, that you're not going to stay in this group for an eternity? We're going to engage in intervention cycles.
Yeah, and we really want to we really want to enhance the student learning by changing that up as much as we can. So we did 9-day cycles. Originally, the materials that I found a lot of things that weren't done in groups of 3. So we did 9 days. And so we would do, and our kit has 9 days that I made. So I do have 9 days within our skill set. The students will go, and so the way that we did it was we had a record card for each student, and we would record where the student was going. And I would physically, because I'm very visual, I had a whiteboard, and I would physically put them into their groups, and then I could see where everybody was. Teachers would take their toolkit and they'd go. Now, if I had a whole bunch of grade 1s, I would not put them with the grade 1 teachers. I want a different teacher. And if I had 2 groups and 1 from each class, I would mix them up. I want different kids. I want different teachers. I want a different experience. I want it to be different than the classroom learning, because these kids have already sat through the classroom where this was taught, probably more than once.
Yeah.
They've probably been taught part of a group that was taught this several times, and they haven't gotten it. So we want small groups, no more than 6. Now, if you're teaching grade 1s, if you can get 4, that would be lovely, because some of them are really busy.
Which is why it was critically important that you got your teachers, your specialists, your paraprofessionals, your substitutes. I saw one school where they had some consistent parent volunteers that they utilized as well.
Because because the days are all the same. So and it's actually nice to have day 1, day 2, day 3, a parent come in, and then day 4, 5, 6 have a different parent. Adults have different takes, different connections, different vibes with the kids. So the kids really benefit from that. Not to say any one person, teacher, parent is not doing a job. It's just that it benefits different kids in different ways.
Yeah.
So we would do no more than 6 students. I can have 6 students sitting in front of me, and I can physically touch each of their materials and their work and help them do what they're doing. So no more than 6, because everybody needs to participate. These students, for a lot of them, they do not learn in a group setting. They're the students when I do talks with groups, I'll say they're the students who sit in the class and I say, so here's a flashcard. It says 2 plus 3. Jimmy, 2 plus 3 is? He says 5. Good job. Timmy, 2 plus 3 is? 5. Good job. Jane, 2 plus 3 is? 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 plus 3 is? Yeah. They didn't get it. They didn't get it. Lots of other kids did. They'll say 5, 5, 5. They got it. But some just can't take it in when it's anybody else but them. Yeah. And that's one of the things we kind of work on as we do it. So yeah, it can be literally anybody. And the other thing is that people have a hard time wrapping their head around is if I'm doing groups of 6 and I have 120 students and 12 adults, 12 times 6 is not 120.
Yeah.
And how do I deal with that? How do I do small groups? And our mindset has to be the students that are furthest behind need our most skilled instructors and need the focus of our time.
Mhm.
Because
They need the smallest groups.
they do. They need the smallest group because if they do not learn to read proficiently by the time they leave grade 2, data research shows they're not going to be proficient readers. They are not. There is not another period of education where they're going to be taught to read. There just isn't. So we need to do it in the lower elementary. And so by having these groups of 6 with our most needy students, the ones that really need to progress the furthest, what we do is we put them into groups of 6. What I do when I do it is I have all my students on the board and I say, how many adults do I have? And so how many groups can I make? And what I do is I make as many groups of 6 as I can until I'm left with a ratio of students to adults that's between 15 to 20 students to an adult. So what I typically, with 12, I would typically get 8 groups of 6, and then that would leave me 4 adults.
And this might be like the group where you mentioned a group that goes and does readers theater for this
Writing.
cycle. Or writing.
I can't do readers theater with 6 students.
No,
Right.
that's right.
It doesn't work. Writing is not fun with 6 students. There's not a lot of idea generating.
Yeah.
Right? I really want a larger group. I don't want 30, but 16 is a lovely number. 18, our librarian, she'd have 22 or 24. She was a real treat. She'd do a little turn and talk after she read it and then have them come back and share ideas. There's lots of things you can do.
But this is where, for our listeners listening, why the cycles are so important, because I might say, and we found this for ourselves, that through that cycle, I might take a student who is significantly behind in their reading acquisition skills, run them through 2 cycles, let's say, and then they've reached a point of
That's enough.
That's enough. And we could move them for the next cycle into a larger group doing something else for a little bit before
Just
we
for a
reintegrate.
change for
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely. Because we want, and the joy is that everybody is doing blast.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows that there's intervention.
Yeah.
Everybody's just doing blast.
Right.
I could take grade 3 students, put them in a grade 1 classroom and have our grade 1 teacher help them learn the alphabet because they were new to our school and they had never learned the alphabet. They didn't think anything of it. Our grade 1 teacher said, oh, thank goodness we've got some big kids here to give us a hand. Come on in, boy. Sit with this group. So she had grade 1s that were struggling and 3 grade 3s. Grade 3s didn't think anything of it. They were in blast.
No, because everyone's in blast. Yeah.
Everyone is. I've had a parent that said, so if he's coming out to do this, what's he going to miss? I said, nothing. Everybody's doing blast.
No.
I had students before that have missed every social studies unit. Because what's more important? Social studies are learning to read. Well, learning to read, although I really like them to have social studies,
Yeah.
you're prioritizing one over the other. But this way, everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
And so by doing it a cycle of 9 days, at the end of 9 days, our students that are really capable. Now, and it's very flexible. I had some grade 3 students that were very, very capable come in and say, how come I don't get to be in a little group? I'd love to be in a little group. You leave that with me. And then I found some things that we needed doing. I think that they were helping write questions to like little students' books or something. They were doing some reading comprehension type activities in a small group. I want everybody to feel like they're getting the same benefits, the same experiences. So they did a round with a small group, and then they went back to the bigger groups. But we did read aloud stories. We did oral comprehension questions, turn and talks. We did the reader's theater, the social emotional books. We actually also had a subscription to Raz Kids on an online reading, and within that program, they listen to books, read books, and answer questions. And for the most part, we had a membership for all the students in the school. And for the most part, the students were listening to the books and then listening to another one and then listening to another one. And we had a teacher at our school who didn't really feel comfortable doing the phonological awareness. She said she thought that her speech wasn't quite correct. And I said, okay, well then we'll do something else. You can read, like do the interactive, read aloud or something. But she loved doing these Raz Kids because she said they need to answer the questions. I said, well, yes, they do. So we had a group of 26 on iPads with headphones in our staff room, sitting on our couches and around the staff table. And they were listening to stories. And she just go one by one. They'd put up their hand. Can you tell me what environment means? Can you tell me what opinion means? And she had wonderful conversations with them about how to discern that, how to get that out of the story. So that comprehension, and that was kinders right up to grade 3. And everybody was working at their reading ability. They were working through their reading levels. And it was a really successful way to use that resource that we had already at our school. A lot of it is resources that we already had at the school.
Yeah.
So much to it, Nancy, and I love the flexibility and I love the structure of it, but we know that data and evidence play an important part in this, and you had actually mentioned that earlier as we were talking, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how does the assessment piece fit in here?
We'll be right back to continue this episode. As school leaders, we have mounting pressures to ensure that data is not only being used to inform our responses, but can be leveraged to evidence if what we're doing is leading to better outcomes for students. Planning for the effective use of data with our teachers is hard, but it doesn't have to be. When schools have a targeted plan for the collection and utilization of data and evidence related to student success, conversations become more focused and staff can see the impact their collective practices are having for students. Join me for the online on-demand workshop, Establishing a School-Wide Data and Evidence Plan. 10 considerations to maximize the use of data in your school. Part of our Supporting Collaborative Response series. In this workshop, I shared 10 considerations for school leaders when establishing a school-wide data and evidence plan focused on the key measures being used to inform priority areas. I also share numerous resources, templates, and samples to help support the effective determination, scheduling, collection, organization, analysis, and sharing of that data. Purchase the workshop and you'll also have the ability to replay all or any portion of the workshop as you wish. Access this on-demand workshop today to learn more about how to effectively align your school's data and evidence as a foundational component of a school's collaborative response. And now back to our conversation.
So it really needs our instruction really needs to be data-driven. And that starts with the initial assessment. So we want to have an assessment that is manageable within a reasonable time frame.
Your screener. Yeah.
Has to be, and quick. But at the same time, it has to be very specific. So we have
skill focused. With that.
Skill.
Yeah.
So there's two aspects in our BLAST kit: phonological awareness and phonics. So phonological awareness can develop. The skills are more flexible in how they develop. So within the for phonological awareness, I'm talking about hearing two parts in cupcake, hearing those two syllables, and say cupcake, and now say it without saying cup, and they can say cake. Because when they learn to read bigger words and they see magnet, I need them to be able to look and see magnet. I need them to be able to see that. And so we start with real words that really do have two parts. So that kind of phonological awareness. And then phonemic awareness, tell me the sound you hear at the beginning of the word. And I can't tell you how many kids that look at me and say, and I say, what's the sound you hear at the beginning of the word cat? And they say, cat. Because they just hear cat. Yeah. It's the animal on the ground. Cat. They don't hear k and t. Those are the kids that sound out and say, paw.
Yeah.
Those aren't the sounds, right? But they don't hear the sounds. Those are those kids that they need to go right back to that beginning. So we assess all of those skills. And then we assess the phonics by having students learn to read some words. So we have students read some words by skill set. And as soon as they get to a point where they can't read that skill, let's say it's the digraphs, the two letters that make one sound, they can't read those, they stop. And that's where they start in the toolkit.
Right.
They can't read digraphs, they start at digraphs. And then they continue to progress through all the other skills. And I've been asked, so what happens if after digraphs you're doing, let's say, silent E at the end? What if they already know silent E at the end? And I say, well, then they're going to be great at that toolkit, aren't they? Right? Then they get the confidence of being able to do the toolkit. So we really do progress them through. So that gives us our starting point. We assess the skills. What skills are they lacking? That's where we're going to start. And we're progressing right through.
Right.
And then once we've got them in those toolkits, what I was able to do was I embedded an assessment into the game that they play on the last day of every toolkit. So they play a game where they are astronauts walking to a spaceship. And every third day, so we have 3 games that rotate. So they start at the astronaut, they cover these words with tokens, send the astronaut to the spaceship. So on the last day, instead of astronauts for 2 rows, it's aliens. And so now they have to read those words to the teacher so that the teacher can give them a cube so they can block the alien from getting on the spaceship. So I go from my 6 students, I get them to read those 2 lines, and I give them a score out of 10. And those 10 words, 5 on each line, those 10 words represent all the different parts of the skill that we've been learning. Mm-hmm. So let's say it's digraphs. You're going to have SH, CH, TH words. You're also going to have words with SH, CH, TH at the end of the word. Mm-hmm. You're going to have all of those skills represented. And I can give each student on that final day a score out of 10 for how well they can do this, they can achieve the skill. Mm. And if they've got 80%, 8 out of 10, you can't keep everybody till they're 100%. So 8 out of 10, we move them on. If they have less than 8 out of 10, what we do is we give them a break and we put them out into one of those bigger those bigger groups. So we let them go and listen to social emotional stories for 9 days. And then we bring them back in and we do that toolkit again. Different group of kids, different teacher. Yeah. And we have them do it again. And the best thing is that it's 9 days later. So typically it's 2 weeks for sure, but because we always have holidays and PD days, it could be 2.5 weeks. And they'll come in and I'll pull it out and the kids will say, hey, I think I know this. And I'll go, I bet you do. Let's get started. And they're doing it again and they're happy because they know it now. And so now they're more successful than they were before, but we try to change things up. So that data, I know that they're doing well. I know that they're progressing because I see them moving through the toolkit. If I see them stalling in a toolkit, now if they repeat a toolkit and they're still not progressing, now I flag them for some one-on-one with me. Now I flag them for what's going on. Maybe they missed half the toolkit. Maybe they were out sick. Maybe we have a truancy issue. I don't know. Maybe they're not cooperating. Maybe now I need to step in and kind of give them some positive support so that they can be more engaged in the group. But that's like, other than that, if they're progressing from toolkit to toolkit, even if it takes 2, and we find sometimes those early ones might take a couple, and then they'll get it. Grade 1, we say the light comes on, right? The light comes on. And for us in grade 1, it's usually that February, March, that light comes on. And for us that year in COVID, it was just that was the year that they should have really flourished. So those kids, I think they're in grade 5 this year, 4 this year. And that makes it really hard.
Well, the beauty of that is that teaching those isolated skills, you are able to see very clearly whether they've got it or whether they don't. And really focusing in on those targeted skills allows them that growth that is needed.
Well, and the confidence.
Yeah.
Now they can do it.
So I think too, when we think about collaborative response, we talk about that puzzle piece of data and evidence, and we talk about 3 different types of assessment, and you've described each one of them. We have a screen that we're going to use for all students to help get the initial placements.
Understand where they are and what gaps they're
Then we're going to have progress monitoring to show, are they capturing the skill? It's embedded right in. But then that diagnostic of, there might be some students we have to go deeper to figure out what's going on. The screen and the progress monitoring doesn't necessarily indicate everything that's happening here for us. Love
exactly. That. We have some, and students. We had students diagnosed with a specific disability in writing or in reading, and they really benefit from that breakdown, that specificity of the teachers, skill by skill. The other component of our lessons that I have to say the teachers absolutely loved that we were doing is that once we get past the phonological, we're into the phonics, every day there's a written component. And a lot of times the teachers will say, I'll say, this student scored in the blends toolkit. He's going to start in blends. And I've had teachers say, he seems to be able to read blends really well in the class, or they'll start the toolkit. And they'll say, oh, I've got these 2 kids. They're really good. And I'll say, do a bit more writing. Because a lot of our students, even once they get to read it, that pulling it out of their head to be able to write it down, they just don't know how to make it come out of their hand and onto the paper. And so in our toolkits, we have whiteboards and dry erase crayons. And every day the students write words to reflect the skills. So it starts right with toolkit 6 doing CVC words. So I would say the word, pat, and it would be, if we're learning short A, then these are all short A words. We're learning E, they're all E words. And at the end, it's going to be a review and a mix. But right now, so if I have students in grade 1 or grade 2, then I might say, let's put an A in the middle. You listen to the beginning and listen to the end. Listen to the beginning, listen to the end. So there's all kinds of ways to structure the instruction, even within the lessons themselves. And then the students would write them down. And writing on a whiteboard is so liberating because I could walk by and take my finger and I could just erase a letter that was wrong and say, put a different letter here. And they'd immediately change it to a different letter and they'd be right. There's no erasing, drawing attention, have to come up, have to redo it. It's all immediate. And a lot of times the students would scatter into space and I would walk around and observe them. They'd be laying on their stomachs with clipboards and they could go wherever they wanted, be under a desk because somebody's going to look at their paper. But I would just walk around and observe and say the words for them to write down. And at the end, they're writing, choice, and they're writing, larger words that really benefits them in all of their writing in the classroom as well.
So before we move off this data and evidence, I do want to just mention one other thing, and I'll put a link into our show notes because I have a webinar where we talk about mistakes leaders make when organizing data, and we talk about not color coding the data, and we actually have a picture that comes from your principal's office in the school where the data was color coded. It was up on a bulletin board, but I used to love that the names had been removed from the data, but because it was color coded, it would show these are all of our students horizontally across. Vertically would be the skills, but you would color code whether they were red, yellow, or green based on our assessments. But then this is where we were at in November. This is what our chart now looks like for that same group of students in March. And it was amazing to see
Stunning.
the shift to green, yellow and green from red and yellow. And visually, it was just stunning. And I remember you telling me that was one of the biggest buy-ins for your staff when they started to see data like that would then justify, look at the gains we're seeing from our interventions.
Demonstrating such growth, but just even in those colors and being able to see how things have changed over that period of time due to the work that staff has been doing.
We'll be right back to continue this episode. I wish we had more data, said no teacher ever. Our contemporary schools have an abundance of data we can be accessing to inform decision making from the classroom level to the school level and beyond. Data as a focal point is no longer elusive. The challenge lies in structuring and presenting it in a way that facilitates easy interpretation and actionable insights. How we organize the data matters. My name is Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. In this free on-demand webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 mistakes leaders make when organizing data for their teams. Access this webinar, and in addition to how to address these 5 mistakes, numerous free resources will be shared with you that you can begin using immediately. I can't wait to have you join me to ensure you aren't committing one or several of these mistakes within your own organization. And now back to our conversation.
Yeah, and you find the same thing within collaborative response. If you're dwelling on one or two of your students specifically, that's where your focus is, when really you need to be looking at the students as a group. And I know we've gone through and said, so who else needs that? So who else is struggling with that? And when we're in our classrooms and we've got those highlight students that are really struggling, we can get really bogged down in that red and not see that development of the green around them. It really is amazing. I know the very first year. So one of the struggles we had was that we had a lot of students who knew their letters and letter sounds. Was great. But they had no ability to hear the sounds in words. So when I'd say, tell me the sound you hear at the beginning of the word, they couldn't pull them off. And so those are our students that would sound out the word and then have no idea what the word was. And so we were really struggling in that. So a lot of the teachers were really struggling with where to start to help them, because typically that's what you do. You learn the letters and then you put the letters together and you learn to read, and that's what we do. We read the written word. And they were really struggling with that. And when we started BLAST, I have a visual of that bar graph. When we started BLAST, we had I assessed grade 1s, grade 2s, and grade 3s. And every grade 2 student, except for, I think, 3, so probably would have been 42 students, scored below phonics. They scored that they needed phonological awareness. even our grade 2 students who could read. So
Mhm.
these are grade 2 students who were probably reading at a F, G, H, I, J. They were reading at those levels. But as the levels get higher and there's fewer and fewer sight words, because sight words was carrying them, picture cues was carrying them, initial consonant or the initial sound was carrying them, they couldn't decode any of those words in the higher text. So as they got to text books that had more text and fewer pictures, we saw grade 3 really started to really bottom out. Students that were progressing fine. They seemed fine in grade 1. They seemed okay in grade 2. They would get to grade 3 and just stop progressing. And then everybody goes along beyond them. And then typically, we have a lot of students that are really good at coping, covering, kind of moving along, but they couldn't decode words. And if you don't know the rules of phonics to decode words, you can't read words.
Yeah.
And then once there's bigger words in your books, in your reading, you're not going to be able to progress. So this going back to those basic skills, breaking it down into those fundamental skills. I think once our staff saw so many of our kids that couldn't do those foundational skills that typically you develop at ages 3 and 4 and 5. So we had 8 and 9-year-olds who couldn't do that. I think that honestly, our staff never really thought to go back and teach that. Right? 2-year-olds can rhyme, 3-year-olds can rhyme, 4-year-olds can rhyme. We had a lot of 7 and 8-year-olds who could not rhyme. And if I'm teaching you make, and I want you to be able to take make and also read cake, bake, take, rake, because you know make. If you can't rhyme that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult.
Nancy, we're going to just wrap up with, I want to be able to ask you clearly have a lot of literacy background. Like you have shared a lot of your expertise and understanding around literacy. And I think about a lot of our listeners or viewers that as a leader in a school would say, oh my gosh, I don't think I can catch up on all of that learning in terms of being a literacy expert to do this.
I hear this all the time of principals saying, but I don't have the literacy expertise
to the place
to lead this. And so I'm really nervous about setting up school-wide interventions.
What would you say to them?
I would say start small and start manageable and start with your most willing participants. So when we talk about doing a common block, get a common block within 2 grades and free 2 grades up so that you have a better dynamic, and start with making those. Talk to the teachers about what they would feel comfortable in leading a larger group. And then you'd want to have a very specific assessment to dive down into those phonological awareness skills. I know that here in Alberta, a lot of the schools use the reading readiness reading tool. There's one online for free by David Kilpatrick called the PAST, Phonological Awareness Reading Tool, I think is what it's called. It's excellent. And that's a component of the toolkits that I have as well. That comes with the toolkits. And then have your teachers gather resources and start with what you've got. Start with what you've got and start small. So when we started BLAST, we started with grade 2s. Our grade 3s needed it the most. We started with grade 2.
It's interesting you say that because we did one cycle with just grade 1s just to try and figure out what could this look like, smaller groups.
That idea of piloting with a small group and not trying to go full scale right away.
No. And everybody needs to see the success.
Yeah.
Because we started with grade 2s because those were the teachers that were really eager to jump on board. They were really, really eager. So we started with grade 2s and we were probably 2 or 3 rounds in when the grade 1 said, there's a lot of those skills my kids need. Can we wrap up? Well, sure. We'll bring in those 3 classes with 3 teachers and 3 EAs. We'll add these 9 people. This is fantastic, or 6 people. This is fantastic. We have, all these more resources and all these smaller groups. So yes, start off smaller. The embedded time period is really key. And then, start small. Start with your most keen people, your most eager people, and find your biggest needs. You're going to find needs no matter where you start.
Well, and what you've just described, I don't need a master's degree in literacy growth and development to set up time in my timetable and start getting people to engage in these groups.
And schools have amazing expertise in every classroom.
Yeah, if we can leverage that.
Yeah, they really do. And it's another huge benefit is I had having a teacher come to me and say, do you think we could do a writing round? And I literally said to her, will you do the writing round? And she said, I'd love to. I said, then we will do a writing round, right? Yeah. It's working on the expertise of your teachers, what they really enjoy, and everybody ends up really, really satisfied by it. Our teachers, they love to be able to work with those small groups, kids that aren't in their class. It's wonderful to see this progress, and teachers are talking about the students. So that collaborative response piece where we're all talking about all the grade 2s, even the ones not in my room. Now we get to know all of the students in the school because I've got a mix of all of the students coming through my groups. Kids I would never normally have much interaction with. They'll be a part of my group. So it really fosters that collaborative atmosphere of your school.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I mean, we've devoted the time and attention here to literacy interventions, and I know that that's been your focus with that BLAST program, but really we're talking about a basic structure. And I've seen schools where they've said, okay, we have the structure built now. Now for the next 3 cycles, we're going to focus on numeracy interventions. We're going to, for this cycle, take 2 cohorts of students who need some work on executive functioning skills.
Absolutely. That's the social emotional books was another really good. But yes, you can pull a group of 6, 8, 10, however many students who have been who have been actually assessed as needing. You work with their executive functioning. Yeah. Put together your activities, get them from the our SLP would actually come in and do section, right? So we kind of lead a couple of sessions and then the teacher would be on their own. That works really well. My school, after the year after I left, they ended up doing putting together kits for math. And so they would do 1 round of literacy. They would take a 5-day break and they would do writing. All the teachers had to be doing that period of writing because there was never enough time to teach writing in the day. But that's the time. And then they would do a block of numeracy. And then they would do some writing. And then they would do literacy because we had gotten to the point where we didn't have as many struggling students because we were doing BLAST all the time.
Yeah.
So, and the education that our EAs received from teaching the BLAST. I mean, I had EAs that came in and said, I don't even know what the difference is between sounds and letters. And I said, what do you mean? Well, like the word take, it's got 4 sounds, then 4 letters, 3 sounds. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Well, now there's a chance I can talk to you about that, right? Not something that they'd be necessarily, realizing, except that they're teaching it. And the education that they received, the PD, the training that they got out of it was really, really great to see too.
So Nancy, we have one last question and we ask it of every one of our guests. You've already made the mention of start small. So I'm going to ask for you to share something else. And the question is, in the spirit of, if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give your past self in relation to the building out of a school-wide intervention? You've mentioned start small. Is there any other advice that you would give?
I think I would be better at sharing the big picture with everybody that was going to be taking part in the intervention. I knew what the big picture was. I saw the overarching goal. But I think I shared that as we went along. And I think that had I been able to, I don't even know that I thought it in my head quite, because we did the same thing, right? We kind of go and tweak as we go. But if I could have stopped and laid it out for staff so that they saw the path, they saw the progression, they saw the plan, I think that they would have been more cohesive as a group moving forward. And I think that they would have had a better, quicker to get their feet under them and kind of be all on the same page.
Yeah.
Within the first year. But yeah, I think that being able to share that a little more earlier, I think
Just
having that big picture and understanding the why. Well, Nancy, this has been such a wonderful time with you, and thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful learnings and ideas. And we'd love to be able to share to our listeners the best way to get a hold of you.
The best way to get a hold of me, because it's probably the easiest to remember, is if you go to my website, nancymacconsulting.ca. Everything is laid out there, pictures of my kits, the whole idea behind it, the reason why large group intervention is really effective. That's all laid out there. And then there's a place there to contact me. I have pricing and everything there. So there's a place there to contact me, send me an email. I love working with individual teachers and schools. I've also been working with some divisions. Everybody's in a different position. Everybody has a different situation, different numbers, different resources, different staff. And I really have a real passion for working with the staff and helping to solve those problems, those challenges that come along, because everybody could benefit from doing this.
That's
Beautiful.
excellent. Well, thank you again.
Yeah,
Nancy.
and we'll make sure to include that website in the show notes as well. So thank you so much, Nancy.
Great.
It's been a pleasure.
For inviting me.
Yeah, pleasure talking and gaining some insights into something that can seem really daunting of setting up school-wide literacy interventions. And I think you've given some great food for thought on how to get started with that.
Yeah, some steps that can get you on the way.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much,
Thanks so much.
Nancy.
Right.
Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Wow, always love engaging with Nancy,
Yeah.
and I have to share with those that are listening. We've known Nancy for quite a while, and I've worked with her directly when first starting this idea of a school-wide literacy intervention, and her clarity in thinking and the advice that she has to give has come such a long ways from that starting point. And one of the key learnings that come out for me is start small. And she exemplified that. And we talked about that when starting, just get started with a group and then expand out to the point where now something that started in a set of grade 2 classrooms for her now is impacting entire divisions who are utilizing some of the resources.
Yeah, and I think it was so important for us to talk about how do you get this started if you're not a literacy expert, because boy, she's so passionate about this work, and she's so excited about being able to make impact for students, and that comes ringing through true and clear. The other thing for me that comes up really clear is those structures that she is laying out clearly through providing that intervention block and consistency in even lesson structures, so that almost anybody could pick up that lesson and lead it, because there's some predictability and consistency in the lesson design, which is good.
The clarity and predictability benefits not only those that are leading groups within the intervention model or block, but the students as well.
Oh, for sure.
Like for the students, she talked about, we're using the same game to practice skills. Everyone's doing blast. It becomes really, really predictable. And we saw this in our own school too, of that blast time became something that students really, really look forward to. And we didn't talk about it in the podcast, but where she had a smaller group, so there was one intervention block in the school, we had a much larger student population. So we had multiple intervention blocks that were built in, but doing the exact same thing. There's a cycle that we run through. We use an assessment to determine, and we keep it skills focused. I think that's one of the really important things if designing some school-wide or what you intend to become school-wide
Yeah.
intervention is it has to be focused on skill.
But the other thing is, and we did this, and Nancy does this clearly too, is that engagement piece, that you're not just creating a situation where students are coming together and doing worksheets as practice, but
Yeah.
she's got games and she's got stories and
Kids are practicing the skills.
and kids are coming together and excited about being part of that blast because she has attended carefully to how do we engage students in this work.
So I think it's really valuable if you want to learn more, go to that website, because
for
what
sure.
may not have come out in the podcast interview is there is a lot of research and science behind the literacy kits that she's developed. This is not just I figured out some skills that kids need to know. There's a huge research base underneath it that may not have come out through the conversation when we were talking more around the getting started.
Yeah. So really fun interview. Hope you enjoyed it. And please reach out. And if there's any questions that you have for us, we're really happy to be able to chat with you about them. And of course, we'll leave Nancy's contact information for you as well.
Yeah, we'll also ensure that there's some additional resources within the show notes. Please visit our website at jigsawlearning.ca. Join the Collaborative Leader Facebook group. We'd love to continue to engage and share how do we go about the many, many, many facets of leading collaborative response, which can involve the creation of that intervention block.
Absolutely.
All right, we wish you all the best. Take care.
See you soon.
Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.